Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pink Flame of Liberty radio show on KHNC. I've been absent for a few weeks. If you haven't noticed, we've been playing some repeats, and you might even hear it in my voice. I actually had, I'm not going to call it a severe case of COVID because, I wasn't hospitalized. I wasn't in any death's door danger or anything like that. But it hit me really hard, like a very, very bad flu. And I haven't recovered from the fatigue. I have a feeling that will be a while. And my voice is not the same. I still have a pretty bad cough, which I will, either edit out or hit the cough button. But if you're wondering why I sound a little bit different, that's why. Though I found that some people have found the new voice nice and sultry. But let's just get started, shall we? I've missed you guys. What we're going to be talking about, at least for a good portion of the show, well, I don't script these things out. I'm kind of wind up and go, is something called jury nullification. And it's something that I was completely ignorant of before I became a libertarian, and did not realize this tremendous duty, right, and privilege that we have. We're going to be going through some of the materials of an advocacy for jury nullification. There's a group called the Fully Informed Jury Association, but that's not the only material we're going to be looking at. If you're like me in the past, though I haven't gotten a jury duty notification since the time that I've come to this knowledge. But if you were like me, you got the summons in the mail and you're like, oh, how am I going to get out of this? It's a pain in the butt. I haven't had it since I've been in Colorado. So I don't know if things are different than they are in Florida. But in Florida, you just sit around all day. Maybe they would call you. You very rarely got chosen. If you had a book to read, maybe it was okay, but usually you were really busy at your work, and even though you got paid, you knew you were going to have to. It was just a pain in the bumpkiss. Really. So you're dreaming of just crazy stuff to say during voir dire. Voir dire is when both sides question the jury to see if they're going to have any challenges to certain juries. That could be a whole other topic. It differs by state, but there's certain automatic challenges, and then they have certain challenges that they can just, they get a certain number that they're allowed to have, but it can't be for protected categories and the like. But you're usually, thinking in your head, what can I say that will make me sound like such a barking moonbat that they won't want me on the jury? Well, I can tell you I will never do that again. I want to serve on as many juries as I possibly can. And just as a side note, a funny story about a jury I was on a long time ago in Florida. It was a drunk driving case, so not one of the most scintillating things. But what made this case interesting, of course, I found out more facts afterwards because, as a juror, as I'm watching this, I'm like, why did this guy even bother to contest this? And it turned out, he's had so many DUIs before. And, of course, we didn't know this as a jury. This is something I found out later. So this poor guy, and I'm not saying poor guy like I commiserate with drunk drivers, because I don't. They kill a lot of people. If you're drunk, don't drive. Be responsible. But it's just, you want to talk about bad luck. So this guy, not only is he drunk driving, he hits a carload of cops. I mean, the only thing you could do worse, I think, is hit a carload of nuns. But it gets better. He not only hit a carload of cops, he hit a carload of cops filming the TV show Cops. Alrighty then. Now I realize the concept of jury nullification might not be something everyone is entirely familiar with. So we'll do some basics of it. We're going to go to the Fully Informed Jury Association website. There's a little quiz they have there. We'll go over some of the information there, and also how Colorado, particularly Denver, had been the epicenter of this within the past 10 years. But before we do that, it's my absolute pleasure to read to you some copy from one of my sponsors. Remember, you can sponsor the show. Just write me at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com. It also goes out to my entire YouTube audience, and it is much more reasonable than you would probably guess. So this is for my friend Daniel Lutz, who is running for House District 49. And to everyone out there, particularly freedom lovers, thank you for running for office and giving of your time. But here's the message from my friend Daniel. Fire is a danger to us all. Boy, do we know that in Colorado, don't we? It threatens our homes, our schools, and our livelihoods. There's a way to provide more funding to our local firefighters without raising taxes on Coloradans. Federal money is given every year to Colorado. 25% is meant to support our local fire authorities, but due to omissions in state law, our firefighters are left out of this funding. Our legislatures need to be focused on finding the problems in our laws like this that need to be fixed, not layering more bad laws on top of broken ones. Our government wouldn't have to keep running back to the people asking for a tax increase if they spent our money better to begin with. Send Daniel Lutz to Denver, and he will work to bring our spending under control. He knows that it's your money, not the government's, and he will treat it that way. For more information, please visit his website at www.lutzfor49.org. And let me spell that. It's LUTZ, and then spell out the word for, FOR, 49.org, and this was paid for by the committee to elect Daniel Lutz to House District 49. Thank you very much for your support, Daniel, and I thank each and every one of you for your support of Daniel with your vote if you are in his district, and if you're not, and you have it within your means. It means a great deal to these candidates to get the word of liberty out there if you could financially support his campaign. I would truly appreciate it. He would truly appreciate it. Now, back to the basics of jury nullification. I know Wikipedia, derpity derp, not everyone thinks that's such a great source, but it is sometimes for just some general background information. At least I think so. And I have a Wikipedia article. Yeah, that's a little humble brag right there. But anyway, I'm just going to go through this. I'm going to skim through it just to give you a little bit of background. Jury nullification in the United States had its origins in colonial America under British law. So under our common law system, which brings up a real interesting, I'm sorry I go off on these rabbit trails, but if you're ever taking a test where they're asking in all states except one when it's dealing with law, you may not know, but everywhere in the United States, our background is in British common law except for one state, and that is Louisiana, which has its background in the Napoleonic Code. There's just maybe one day you'll be on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Give me a cut of it if the Napoleonic Code in Louisiana ends up saving your bacon because you know some weird bit of trivia. In the United States, jury nullification occurs when a jury in a criminal case reaches a verdict contrary to the weight of evidence, sometimes because of a disagreement with the relevant law. The American jury draws its power of nullification from its right to render a general verdict in criminal trials. The inability of criminal courts to direct a verdict, no matter how strong the evidence, the Fifth Amendment's double jeopardy clause, which prohibits the appeal of an acquittal, and the fact that jurors cannot be punished for the verdict they return. These are protections that we enjoy in this country that are not enjoyed in many others. And this Wikipedia article traces the tradition back specifically to a 1670 religious freedom case in which Quakers were acquitted by a jury of violating a law that, basically outlawed their religion. And then it says in 1735, there was a journalist who was acquitted by a jury that nullified a law making it a crime to criticize public officials. Wow. But there is, most good things can be used for bad, correct? And there is a little bit of a checkered past where just before the American Civil War, there would be northern juries and southern juries who would basically acquit based upon racial lines. And some of those were justified and some of those were not. Some of the justified ones, in my opinion, where they would refuse to convict people under the fugitive slave law. To me, that's a perfect use of jury nullifications. But also, there have been history in the South where there were white people who obviously committed violence against black people, and all white juries had acquitted them. So obviously, some things can be used for good or ill that shouldn't taint the whole thing. But I did want to give you a balanced perspective. Let's talk more after the break. Well, hello, we are back, and I remind you, you can always reach me at pinkflameofliberty@gmail.com. Questions, comments, arguments, or to inquire about becoming a sponsor of the show. Again, the prices are way more reasonable than you may think. So we were going over just some of the basics of what exactly is jury nullification. And we went through, some of the history, particularly considering race relations in this country. And there was a case study that is very interesting. And also, I wanted to bring up the history of jury nullification. Also became very important during Prohibition, which was an immensely unpopular a law. Okay, and then there is an interesting study that I had mentioned a little bit earlier, and then went off into Prohibition, which noted that juries acquitted when judges would have convicted in only 19% of the cases, and of these, only 21% of the acquittals were attributable to jury nullification. And it also notes that jury nullification is not only finding someone not guilty, it can also take the form of convicting the defendant of lesser charges than the prosecutor thought. And this is a huge protection upon our rights when, I don't know the technical term for it, but I like to call it charge stacking, in which prosecutors will pile charge upon charge upon charge upon somebody in order to scare them into taking a plea bargain. That's a whole other issue, and I do think that's prosecutorial misconduct. Now, in the 21st century, and this is very important to myself as a libertarian and in the general libertarian discussion, jury nullification very often centers around drug laws. A lot of people consider drug laws unjust in principle, which I do, and also unjust in their application as disproportionately affecting minority communities. Now, I know not everyone agrees with that. That is a position I hold. I have heard Ben Shapiro dispute this a million times, and I'm just going to respectfully disagree. I think any honest assessment, looking at the difference between sentencing guidelines and actual sentences for conviction regarding cocaine, which is primarily and more upper class, also drug of choice of white people, to crack cocaine, which is generally of a lower socioeconomic class that is dominated by minority communities. This is not something unique to me being pointed out. It says, in criminal cases, jury nullification arguments often focus on the precise language of the jury instruction of burden of proof. Many jury instructions on burden of proof invite nullification arguments because juries must find the defendant not guilty if the case has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Conversely, the jury should find the defendant guilty if the case has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The word should arguably allows juries to consider nullification arguments. It's also possible to receive a specific jury instruction on nullification, though obviously most judges avoid the topic. And unfortunately, I think most judges are either misinformed or uninformed on the actual right of juries to exercise jury nullification. So they do not tell jurors of their power to judge the fairness of the law and how it is applied, as well as the facts of the case. To me, jury nullification is the ultimate taking back of the power of the people. I know people tend to think it's the voting booth. I think it's the jury booth. Wikipedia mentions multiple famous cases that are speculated to be instances of jury nullification. These include the prosecution of Washington, D.C.'s former mayor, Marion Barry, the trial of Lorena Bobbitt, the prosecution of the police officers accused of beating Rodney King, the prosecution of two men charging with beating Reginald Denny, and the resulting riots, the trial of the surviving Branch Davidian members, the trial of the Menendez brothers for their parents' murder, and perhaps most famously, the O.J. Simpson murder case. Now, I know that is going to evoke a lot of emotions in people. And I'm going to tell you flat out, I think O.J. Simpson is guilty as the day is long. Now, does that somehow sour me against jury nullification because I think it was used wrongly and I think it was used in a blatantly race-baiting manner? No, because I do remember the American and the Libertarian principle that it's better that 10 guilty men walk free than one innocent man go to jail. And I would revise that to say, or a person where they may have actually technically been guilty of breaking the quote-unquote law, but the law itself is not innocent. It's a guilty law, and people should not be put in rape cages because of it. It also continues, it says, in the days preceding Jack Kevorkian's trial for assisted suicide in Michigan, his attorney told the press that he would urge the jury to disregard the law. Prosecutors, shame on them, prevailed upon the judge to enter a pretrial order banning any mention of nullification during the trial, but Fieger's statements had already been extensively reported in the media. Also, in a fairly recent, 1998, Vanderbilt University Law School article, it was suggested that jurors today are balking in trials in which a conviction could trigger a 3 strikes or other mandatory sentence. Mandatory sentences are another frickin' abomination we can talk about another time. And in assisted suicide, drug possession, and firearms cases. So I know a lot of listeners of this station would consider themselves more conservative than libertarian. So some of those things you might be going, yay, and other things you might be going, ah. You want to know what? Freedom is freedom. And it's not just the freedoms you go, yay, for. All right, let's take a moment for a sponsor break. I am so pleased to have as a sponsor of this program, Asteros, pronounced like Fred Astaire, but spelled ASTEROS.com. And what they provide is cybersecurity services. Now, I know some people's eyes will roll in the back of their head when, they see these $10 words. But this is actually a very, very practical service that 90% of you listening, you either need or you know somebody who needs it. And what they practice is ethical hacking. And what I mean by that is you hire them for, if you have a business or organization, and they will find the weak spots in your technology, like how your website can be hacked or other valuable digital assets that you have can be hacked. They also offer training classes for your employees so that they don't fall prey to phishing schemes and other ways that psychological manipulation is used to weaponize your own staff against you into allowing bad guys inside your digital doors. And I tend to think that I'm pretty wise to these sorts of things. And I don't think it was actually Asteros, but a former employer did hire one of these companies that did these little tests. And I thought, I'm going to ace this. And you want to know what? In one of the simulated phishing things, I fell for it. So please go to Asteros, asteros.com/free. And what that will get you is a surface level audit. So they'll come do a preliminary, like poking around at your digital assets and tell you some obvious weaknesses and ways that you can avoid these. And I think you are going to find that you need this service. So that is Asteros.com, Asteros.com. And I thank them and my friend Zach very much for being a sponsor of this program. And I'm just going to leave their name up here while we're talking about jury nullification, because Zach is a libertarian, and I think he would agree. So let's go back to that Wikipedia article here and see if there's anything else interesting that we would like to cover. All right, so what I want, and there is, the tide started to turn against jury nullification, and of course, because it gives power to the people. Anything that gives power to the people, eventually the government and its employees will turn against it. So there's no precedent that revokes jury nullification, but 19th century courts have tended to restrain juries from considering it and insist upon authority on deference to court-given law. The first major decision on this is a case called Games versus Styles ex dem Dunn, which held that the bench, meaning the judge, could override the jury's verdict on a point of law. Bad. Bad, bad, bad. And also, there is an 1895 decision written by Justice John Marshall Harlan that held that a trial judge has no responsibility to inform the jury of its right to nullify laws. Okay, unfortunately, it is time, or fortunately, I mean, it keeps the lights on, time for another break, and we will continue afterwards. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to continue without further ado. Where we left off is that it's been determined by the courts that there's no obligation to inform jurors of their rights to nullify laws that they find unjust. Often cited, it has led United States judges to commonly penalize anyone who attempts to present legal arguments to jurors and to declare a mistrial if such argument has been presented to them. In some states, jurors are likely to be struck from the panel during voir dire, which is the questioning of the jury, if they will not agree to accept as correct the rulings and instructions of the laws provided by the judge. A 1969 Fourth Court decision, U.S. versus Moylan, affirmed the power of jury nullification, but also upheld the power of the court to refuse to permit an instruction to the jury to this effect. And to me, that's just abominable, that you want to keep citizens in the dark about their rights. But I will note one of the shining stars is the late Chief Justice of the Washington State Supreme Court, William Goodloe, who was an advocate, as all judges I think should be, of jury nullification, and he suggested that the following instruction be given by all judges to all juries in criminal cases. You are instructed that this being a criminal case, You are the exclusive judges of the evidence, the credibility of the witnesses, and the weight to be given their testimony, and you have a right also to determine the law in this case. The court does not intend to express any opinion concerning the weight of the evidence, but it is the duty of the court to advise you as to the law, and it is your duty to consider the instructions of the court. Yet in your decision upon the merits of the case, you have a right to determine for yourselves the law as well as the facts by which your verdict shall be governed. And that's a pretty tame instruction, but, government, let's just leave it at that. And I'm so proud to note that the Wikipedia article does say that the United States Libertarian Party platform states, we assert the common law right of juries to judge not only the facts, but also the justice of the law. And the Wikipedia article notes that some see jury nullification as one of the so-called 4 boxes of liberty. And I'll just note this quote because I had never heard it before, and I like it. It says, the 4 boxes of liberty is an idea that proposes there are 4 boxes to be used in the defense of liberty: soap, ballot, jury, and cartridge. All right, we'll leave that at that and continue. And an interesting bit of trivia here is one of the opponents of jury nullification is former judge and unsuccessful Supreme Court nominee Robert Bork. In an essay he wrote, he called it a pernicious practice. Oh, dear me. Let's clutch our pearls. Oh, I got pearls on my shirt. Let's clutch our pearls. Okay, next we're going to take this closer to home to Colorado. But before we do, I'm going to advocate another way you could advance freedom through one of those boxes we just talked about. The other one being the ballot box. No, we're not going to be talking about the cartridge box today. And that is to advocate for voting reform. One potential way we can reform our voting system is through approval voting. Approval voting, I am proud to say, is one of the sponsors of this show. Hey, Frank, how are you doing? Approval voting moves us beyond two-party thinking. It leads to fewer spoilers. Voters can vote for both a candidate that they really like, who they believe probably has no chance of winning, and also a more popular candidate who does have a chance of winning. It will lead to more civility. When a group of friends wants to stay friends and are trying to decide on things such as a restaurant or a movie, they use a show of hands, which is a rudimentary form of approval voting. It will lead to less polarization because the voter is not forced to focus on only two candidates. Again, approval voting will move us beyond two-party thinking, and you can contact Colorado's approval voting effort by phone or text at 720-439-6000, or, do the Google or the DuckDuckGo, whatever you prefer, and search approval voting party. Okay, let's bring this closer to home. Colorado has been the flashpoint for some jury nullification cases in the past 10 years. If you've been paying attention to the news, or you're interested in the goings-on at the Capitol and at the Denver courthouse, you probably will have heard of these cases. So we're going to go back to 2015. And in August of 2015, taking a look here at a report, Denver police seized 1,000 pamphlets advocating jury nullification from a group of demonstrators outside the Lindsay Flanagan courthouse, where Denver's first death penalty case in almost 15 years was being argued. The pamphlets informed potential jurors of their centuries-old right to nullify unjust or immoral laws by finding criminal defendants not guilty, even if they have, in fact, broken the law. And in an example of not all heroes wear capes, David Lane, a Denver civil rights attorney, filed a motion in federal court on behalf of the demonstrators, calling police jackbooted thugs and asking for the city and Denver police chief, Robert White, to be held in contempt for violating a court order affirming the protesters' First Amendment rights. And according to Lane, and I agree with him, the police seized the demonstrators' property and pamphlets, not due to concerns about violence, but about the message contained in the literature, which is classic First Amendment violation. And I love this quote. Whether demonstrators are polite or not polite, whether these guys are annoying or not annoying, doesn't matter. The First Amendment lives in a rough neighborhood. Woof! Mic drop time. Oh, I have a mic. Mic drop time. A day before the clash between the police and the demonstrators, a Denver judge barred protest outside the courthouse, and that already is disgusting, saying he feared violence if a jury decided to sentence Dexter Lewis to death. Oh, dear me. We want to be able for the state to kill somebody in complete peace and silence. Lewis had been convicted of fatally stabbing 5 people at a Denver bar in 2012. We can talk about, and I have multiple times in the past, about the death penalty. But I don't think the minute you start giving the state the power to execute its citizens, whoa, you just went down a dark path. So less than 24 hours after ordering the order prohibiting the protest, U.S. District Judge William Martinez issued a preliminary injunction allowing the demonstrators their First Amendment rights. Oh, I mean, I'm grateful he did that, but it just is so offensive to me to say you need an order allowing you to exercise your rights. And this included distributing jury nullification pamphlets. And I want to tell you how brave these protesters were. Braver than me, because I had heard of this going on at the time, and I was a libertarian at the time. And I have to tell you, one thing, I'm not, some people think I'm super brave. One thing I'm scared of, though I'm less scared of now because of a tip given to me by Adam Kokesh, I have like this just completely irrational fear of having to shower with other people. And he told me, if you ever get arrested and you don't want to have to get naked, and other people in a public shower, just refuse to take the tuberculosis test and they'll put you in solitary. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the hint that he gave me. But let me tell you how brave these people were. Just a month before and several weeks after that, people had been arrested for passing out these pamphlets. And I believe it was a felony. That's like no joke, facing the potential conviction as a felon. I mean, some of you know that I sued the state of Colorado for the right to take a ballot selfie. And I have to tell you, I was even a little scared on that one, and I was only being threatened with a misdemeanor. I mean, it was up to a year in jail and $1,000 fine, but it wasn't a felony. Honestly, I don't know if I would have challenged that law and taken the ballot selfie in violation of the law if I possibly could have been convicted of a felony. And speaking of weird felonies, I think it's Oklahoma, and I'm pretty sure the law is still in effect. But did you know that displaying an anarchist flag in Oklahoma is a felony? Oops, I would be in big trouble. I wonder if my necklace, well, it's not a flag. Also, insulting the United States flag is a felony. And I always just have these weird pictures like, what does that mean? You're a jerk, you jerky flag. You're a jerk. I mean, I don't know. I just get a weird sense of humor. And a spokesperson from the Fully Informed Jury Association, which I keep saying I'm going to get to, that's who you need to Google to get pamphlets, to get more information on this. Again, FIJA, the Fully Informed Jury Association. And at the time, Kirsten Tynan, who was at the time the executive director of that organization, said the heavy-handed actions of the Denver district attorney are basically doing their job by informing the public of their rights. So in April 2016, the criminal charges were dropped, And Attorney Lane at the time told the Denver Post he was weighing whether or not to file a civil rights suit against the prosecutors for the men's arrest and detention. And for their part, scumbags, prosecutors filed an appeal seeking to have the charges reinstated. Boo hiss. Nevertheless, while the legality of the arrest and harassment of demonstrators is subject to dispute, Denver police and prosecutors have maintained their battle against the activists. And this just inspires me to go out and do likewise. Not harass protesters, but to go out and protest. All right, another break. Okay, and welcome back. We are on our last segment, and I will be mentioning this a lot in the last segment. But what inspired this again was me sitting in Texas in a booth next to the Fully Informed Jury Association. So their website, FIJA.org. I'll say that a bunch of times this last segment to make up for lost time. But I want to finish the story of what happened in Colorado, since that is of particular interest to us. So, and the analogies on this to my ballot selfie case are so interesting to me. Because if you didn't know, the whole reason the state of Colorado was in this big panic about ballot selfies is, we have to protect against vote selling. So everyone has to be punished for the couple people that might sell their vote. That's like a dragnet approach. If you really think you have a problem with vote selling, which we don't, then target that. You don't get to crack down on people's First Amendment speech, particularly when it's explicitly political in content. Now, the argument against the jury nullification, passing out the pamphlets, what they use is, that's tampering with the jury. There always is some kind of dragnet excuse because we can't all be adults. Though I'm going to tell you kind of a funny story. I think I said this before, but it just makes me laugh each time. In my ballot selfie case, the attorney that was representing me was also representing some people from other political parties. He himself was very much a progressive, but a strong proponent of civil rights. So, no conflict there. But it was so funny when we were doing the initial interview and he was saying, the arguments they're going to be making is that this is to prohibit vote selling. And I looked him dead in the face and I said, I think people should be able to sell their vote. And he said, please don't volunteer that in court. Obviously, if I was asked the question, I was going to answer it truthfully. But the look of sheer desperation on his face, he's dealing with this wild and wacky libertarian. Anyway, that was just one of my funny little stories. As I'm getting older, I could tell I'm getting older because I start going off into stories. So, authorities charged those two men that we had talked about, who in August, I believe it was, of 2015, were harassed by the police and arrested with violating Colorado's jury tampering statute, which provides that a person commits jury tampering if, with intent to influence a juror's vote, opinion, or decision, or other action in a case, he attempts directly or indirectly to communicate with a juror other than as part of the proceedings in the trial of the case. Now, what's so insidious here, even more so than in my case, is how is it tampering with a jury to inform them of their rights? Would it be equally tampering with a jury if someone was outside the courthouse passing out a pamphlet describing the different burdens of proof in a civil case and a criminal case? Or would that just be considered general civics education? I think we know the answer to that. The only reason this is considered tampering is because it's taking power away from the government. The law also defines a juror as any person who is a member of any jury or grand jury impaneled by any court of the state, and includes any person who has been drawn or summoned to attend as a prospective juror. Their names are difficult to pronounce, so I'm just going. The two men filed a motion to dismiss, contending that the law violated the First Amendment, both on its face and as applied to them, which it absolutely did. A trial court determined the law was unconstitutional as applied to the two men. The Colorado Court of Appeals affirmed, but for a different reason. And honestly, I'm pretty opposed. Maybe I'll talk it through and not be as opposed to the reason they affirmed it. I actually think it's quite insidious, the reason why they affirmed it. I'm glad it was affirmed, but it should have just been affirmed on First Amendment grounds. So it says the intermediate court determined that the charges should be dismissed because the statute only prohibits attempts to influence persons sitting on an actual jury or in the jury pool for a specific case. So basically they were saying educating actual jurors on just basic rights they have as a jury is jury tampering. That is insane. That is barking moonbat, un-American, unfreedom. Anti-freedom, I guess is the word I was looking for. On further appeal, the Colorado Supreme Court also affirmed the dismissal, albeit on slightly different grounds. The Colorado High Court reasoned that the statute was unconstitutional as applied to the two defendants because defendants' efforts to influence a juror must be directed to a specifically identifiable case. And, again, I have the same objections. And in the dissenting opinion, Justice Carlos, I think it's some more, wrote that advocating for jury nullification threatens the integrity of our judicial proceedings, actually of judicial proceedings, not our, and undermines the public's trust in the justice system, as if the public had any trust in the justice system to begin with. So advocating for rights you have under the system threatens the integrity of the system. Is that like you need to destroy the free market to save the free market? He said that the majority's interpretation improperly shrinks the scope of jury tampering statute nearly to the point of extinction. Get the fainting couch for this guy. My God. All right. Now on to FIJA.org, which is the Fully Informed Jury Association. I picked up some of their literature in Texas. There's some, and you could get this at their website. But there's some nice door hangers. I won't promise you won't get arrested, though, even though you shouldn't be. And here is we're going to read some of this literature, but I have a door hanger here from them. And what rights do you have as a juror that the judge won't tell you? I believe it was a similar pamphlet to this that was being passed out, and we will be taking a look at that. Here's also a primer for prospective jurors, and there's some just basic freedom information they gave me as well, but I want to stick to jury nullification. So let's look at what rights do you have as a juror that the judge won't tell you. True or false? When you sit on a jury, you may vote on the verdict according to your conscience. True or false? The answer is true. So the pamphlet goes on to say, so why do most judges say you must blindly enforce the law? As they explain it, that you may only consider the facts, that your conscience, opinion of the law, or circumstances that might make enforcing the law unjust must not affect your decision. As this pamphlet points out, jurors are the judges. And a trial by jury, the judge's role is to be a referee and give neutral legal advice to the jurors. This should include, they didn't put should, I added that, and fully informing them of their rights and responsibilities. Early American trial judges would inform jurors of their right to judge the law as well as the facts. They permitted attorneys to do so as well. And it says, as we discussed in the history we gave earlier. Judges began willfully obstructing this veto power during the 1800s in order to enforce unjust and unpopular laws such as the Fugitive Slave Act. Today, judges rarely inform jurors of their right to judge the law itself and to vote not guilty, even if the law has been broken, when this is necessary to deliver actual justice. Rather, judges aid prosecutors by dismissing both prospective and sworn jurors who express qualms about the law or who know their right of conscientious acquittal and consider using it. So, if you want to do your civic duty, I don't even want to call it a duty, if you want to be part of the 4 boxes of liberty and to sit on a jury, don't tell them you know about jury nullification during voir dire and keep your mouth shut about it during deliberations. And because you can get thrown off even after you're selected merely for advocating for rights that you have. Welcome to America with a K. Thou shalt not defy the government. This just, as you can tell, infuriates me. So on the back, I will urge the same thing that's on the back here. Tell this secret, but not during voir dire and not while you're impaneled. Prisons are needlessly overflowing with harmless people whose lives are tragically being destroyed just because jurors aren't fully informed. And you want to know what? There are people who are haunted because they believed they had to deliver a guilty verdict and they felt the law was unjust and they know that their vote helped put a person in jail that they don't believe belongs there. The government did that to them. If called for jury duty, you may want to keep this information to yourself so you're not dismissed. Even as late as deliberation, a jury who is considering nullification may be removed. So we do not recommend discussing this openly with other jurors. Jurors cannot legally be removed for expressing doubt about whether the accused has violated the law, so it is good to express your doubts if you have them. Otherwise, spread this information far and wide, and you can get information on this at fija.org. Bless you, this organization. You are doing God's work.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to